of Ramadan, and I have been participating in the fasting, and I've also done a few other fasts throughout, um, where I extended the fast to a full-on fast for a total of 5 days without food um, and just water. And so I wanted to just comment on the fast. So for me, the fast is, if you can say it, you can put it in the spiritual bucket. But it's also kind of within the spiritual bucket. I kind of define the spiritual bucket also to include exploration or experiments with truth. So one of the experiments that I was running was to understand my relationship with food. Now I have an all raw diet, and I've mainly eaten vegetables, mushrooms, root vegetables, sea vegetables, a lot of different seaweeds, nuts, seeds, and limited to no fruit or others, primarily sweet food. And that's not been processed, that's been whole plant based. And so this was a change for me because what I did was, because I could only eat in the after sunset or before sunrise. The problem with that is I meditate in the very early morning, starting at 4:30, and then I go to bed around 8, and usually sunset is around there. So I had to find a faster way to eat my food, so I ended up using a blender. So it was a fascinating experience of switching. I haven't had any type of processed food in several years, so that was an interesting experience. But what I want to talk about is the phantoms of the very elusive phantoms that have come out of this experience for me. So for me, food hasn't been a problem. I do not crave other types of food. I haven't gone to a restaurant in several years. When I walk by some food that I used to really like, it doesn't affect me. I've primarily extinguished a lot of the desire and craving and grasping that is attached with food, and I've done that through several experiments and other parts. I'm not entirely sure why I don't have that relationship. So for me, eating this food is not torture at all, as some people suspect it would be, and that's because they are actually projecting their own loss aversion onto me. But I actually don't experience any loss aversion, and I don't experience. I have at times, but I currently don't experience superiority complex, neither an inferiority or an equality complex. I just eat the food that I eat. And I experimented with it because I was discriminating against it. I used to discriminate against raw food. I used to eat Taco Bell, McDonald's, and lots of heavily sauced food, Indian, Mexican, lots of different foods. So then I slowly moved over to cleaner Japanese cuisine, to eventually going raw, whole plant-based, not cutting anything, just however it's been cut by the farmers. So what happened was I didn't have to deal with craving, so that's great. So it was pretty easy to get the fasting started. But what I did notice was there was, I usually have nuts throughout the day. There were these moments where I call it a phantom, and it's kind of half of a phantom. So first you have the want for something, the desire for something, and then you try to satiate that need. But there's also something that comes from that. There's a general feeling of disease, and it's kind of in the background. It doesn't happen all the time. Some hunger is what's called homeostatic, which means, yeah, you should eat. And then some hunger is hedonic. Now the line between is very blurred, and we can't be so sure about which is which. But let's assume that we can be. I was having these hedonic kind of activity-based eating, meaning well, I'm not doing anything. I just got outside of a meeting. Maybe I'll grab some nuts. And it wasn't that I was hungry or anything, but I would have this trigger. So half a phantom, as I'm calling it, the phantom. Um, and I would feel like, oh, but I couldn't react to it because I had already set the um, parameter of that I'm doing Ramadan. So for me, when I set a rule like that and I say I'm going to do Ramadan, body plays along quite nicely. I don't even know if I'm deciding, but I can tell you that once I decide, it's pretty clear. There won't be any breakage. Um, and that's with a lot of things, such as wearing grey. I decided to wear grey 2.5, 3 years ago, 3 years ago, and I haven't stopped. I haven't wore not grey in 3 years. So that wasn't the problem. The problem wasn't a call to arms. The problem was that it wasn't a problem actually. It was the interesting part was I had this moment where I was being called out. I can feel something in my body. I can become aware of it. Hey, I'm supposed to do something, and you can feel the kind of ghost or the phantom of what you're supposed to do. And then I started to realize how much throughout the day that I was mindlessly eating due to not wanting to be with myself, or not wanting to sit in the silence, or feeling bored or feeling inactive. And a big part of my practice is that you should feel at home in the world. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you should feel at home. And what happens is, over the years, a lot of my grasping for things, I've become more minimal. And not just because I wanted to become minimal, but also because I feel quite at home. So I feel quite content. So therefore, I'm not always grasping. So I don't have a phone, and I don't feel a craving to have a phone or be connected with people all the time, or the newest laptop. Or I'm quite satisfied with what I have. I'm not complacent. The illusions that the things that we project onto it are not present for me for a lot of things. The things that because it's really like phone upgrades, we often upgrade them all the time. And even though the feature or the subset is quite limited. So it is a projection that we need that. It is a false projection. And I think it also stems from this general disease of not valuing oneself, not being in the present. So I had all these moments to experience where I wasn't in the present. I was thinking, oh, can't wait till I get some nuts, or I can't wait till maybe I'll go and get some of this or that, and this future, imagining future pleasures was alive in me. And I didn't know that it was so alive in me as it was. So during these 40 days, it's been great to see these phantoms, because I've had lots of meditation practice, living in a Zen temple. So that's enabled me to be aware of that in a way that I wasn't before. I experimented a lot in the past, but I didn't have this level of awareness. So with this level of awareness, I was able to see, oh, look at that. Would you look at that? Look at that coming up. There it is. It has this weird texture to it, this arising of grasping, of wanting to, asking the body to act on something, trying to persuade. And I could feel that persuasion. It was not very strong, but it was strong enough for me to notice it. And then to be able to, each time, after I explored this after the first week or so, I decided and committed to, each time that happens, is to do nothing. And to me, that's about reworking the seeds. In Buddhism, in the Yogacara tradition, there's something called alaya, and that's the alaya vijnana, which is the store consciousness or repository consciousness. And I like the way Thich Nhat Hanh explains it. Is there's bija, or bija, seeds. There's these seeds And basically, you can slightly equate the Aliyah consciousness, because in the Yogacara there's 8 consciousnesses. There's the Aliyah, which is the base. There's the Manas, which is the thing that kind of grasps self, and there's the 6 sense consciousness. One of those being the conceptual or prefrontal cortex. The other ones being the eye, ear, nose consciousness. Those. So the Aliyah is considered the storehouse, or in a way, I like to think of it as where all the karma is kind of stored up, and it's neither just your storehouse, and neither is it just the collectives. Um, the point being is that we have these seeds, and we can imagine that we're always watering some set of seeds, and then what we're actually realizing. So if I have this hunger or desire, I'm not realizing the seed. I'm actually realizing the fruit, the what the seed bear, because I cannot know the seed directly. And I could talk about that at another time. I think it's insightful that the Aliyah Vijnana is unknowable. So while there are a lot of psychological practices that go back into your history and try to say, okay, I've got this bias, and maybe I'm prejudiced, and maybe I'm sexist, and maybe I'm racist, and so I've got to go back and do the childhood story and go through the trauma. Much of the Yogacara tradition that I've read on is revealing that you cannot know your prejudices that well, not in that sense. And the neuroscience literature shows that as well. It's like, even if you take a sexist person and show them images of the sex that they're against, you can manipulate that very easy in ways that the person who even identifies as a sexist would not realize that they weren't a true sexist. And in fact, it was a lot more complicated, showing different versions of, let's say, if they were sexist against women, showing different versions of that in manipulated ways. So changing either the skin color or the hair type or the environment that they're in or the clothing that they wear. You can manipulate their their sexism, even to the point where the sexism doesn't exist. And the way that's tracked a lot of times is looking at, is there amygdaloidal or activity in the amygdala, right? Or is there activity in the, you can also check kind of physiologically. Mostly I've looked at papers that are look at the neural correlates from a functional level. There are also some ones that I'm sure check the hormones that are present, the neurotransmitters. So the point is that the Aliyah is unknowable, and it's kind of a interesting thing to do, but from the Yogacara point of view, it's not very helpful to try to conceptualize your biases. Instead, actually, you just want to deal with the seeds in the present. So as they come up, you can use mindfulness of emotions, mindfulness of thoughts, and practice with those directly. Because the idea is that you're watering seeds. And when that seed goes forth, becomes a tree, and then bears fruit, let's say, then you're actually seeing your whole life is the operation of those fruit, of what each of those seeds has bared or produced. So the solution then the solution becomes very clear, which is you want to water the seeds that are nourishing, and you want to stop watering the seeds that are not. So I have this moment come up where I'm having this pang, I believe, and it's after I'm doing something. I don't feel particularly hungry, but I feel this sense of grasping on, of desire, of imagining this pleasurable world, future world that I can be in, and then I just sit with it. So instead of watering that seed, and allowing it to grow again, you're actually starting to stop the cycle. And so that's one way to do it. Another way is also, it's not mutually exclusive, you can also plant new seeds. So when that moment happens, instead of just sitting with it, which is still a great foundation, and I would encourage anyone who's starting to start there, is to plant new seeds. So when that comes up, have compassion, bring up bodhicitta, flashing bodhicitta, for yourself, or for, say, I know others are experiencing this desire, this hunger as well, and I have compassion for them. So you're not only negating or letting go and not watering the seeds that aren't nourishing, you're also beginning to water new seeds that are more nourishing, seeds of compassion. And so, of course, this language over Alaya Vijnana is conceptual and not actually as straightforward as I'm saying, but it's a good blueprint to try to practice. And so that's what I saw during this Ramadan period, these moments where I was able to see it arise and then do nothing. I didn't sow seeds, new seeds in a sense, but maybe I did, but not in the formal way that I've explained. So the thing is, food for me has been such a spiritual practice. It's so spiritual to me. And it's such a great place to start practicing if you have an intense relationship with food. Because things are grossly or it's very coarse, meaning you can easily see the desire for food. So if you have that problem, great, you've got something to work with. And remember that suffering is a part of the whole package. It's not something to exclude you. And so sometimes we get obsessed about performance. So we want the best food right now, and we want to prevent ourselves from eating the bad food. Maybe that's okay, but it's also wrong-headed in some ways, or it's not deep enough. Maybe it's not wrong, it's not deep enough, as Suzuki Roshi might say. And it's wrong-headed, or it's not deep enough in the sense that this is not a performance. You want actual extinction, right? So in putting away the grasping, not killing desire, we're perfectly fine with having desires. The problem is the grasping, the projecting, and the deluding ourselves into believing that that's going to save us from and make our lives happier and better overall. So when we consider our practice, we should be considering that it is not a performance. It's not about being perfect. It is about practicing with whatever's alive. So in a way, the more awareness, the better, but also the messier, the better. And those are connected and correlated, of course. If you have not enough awareness, then it being messy may be irrelevant. Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Talk about treating food as this beautiful ground for spiritual practice, and in regards to my Ramadan. And I've also decided to continue this diet of 1 meal a day. I will modify it to where I do drink throughout the day, because I believe that's probably more nourishing, and we'll see. And I won't have food throughout the day. I'll have 1 meal a day, and then on weekends I plan on doing a full fast. So I think that this has been teaching me quite a lot, so I want to continue it and see what happens. So thank you guys, and talk to you next time.